Tim, thanks for coming on Melbourne Calling. Welcome to the Fits.
Thanks, Steve.
You're like probably the most prominent developer in Melbourne, definitely the most successful. I guess you're like the public face of capitalism in a sense in Melbourne. I mean, how did it all start? I mean, what the media says, you got 34K from your granddad, you opened up a gym in Elwood. I mean, most gym owners that I know are pretty juiced up, and like you'd never expect them to go from 34K to 600 million plus. I mean, how did you get there? I know there's a little bit of good timing with GFC, finance, money coming out of finance into property, but I mean, how would you explain to the general public how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny story. I'm definitely a different story to most developers. So my mum was CEO of Berry Street for child welfare for 30 years, so non-for-profit. My dad was an engineer who passed away when I was 20. So I came from a very simple upbringing. We didn't have a lot of money at the time. We were definitely middle class, so I went to Carey Grammar, but it was I was always the kid with the blazer a couple of sizes too big because we couldn't afford it each year. But I had an amazing upbringing, but not a wealthy upbringing at all. And I had great support from my mum and dad to try and be whatever I wanted to be. And so I went and did commerce first at Melbourne Uni and finished RMIT. And then halfway through that, I decided I wasn't a great student, Stephen, probably like you as well. My patience was very low. So I started working part-time with a guy called Tony Pride, a real estate agent in St Kilda, who was doing a bit of development on the side. Amazing mentor for me. I did that with him for about 2 years, and then I saw this opportunity in Elwood, which is a gym. At the time, I had literally no money at all, wouldn't have even had $2,000 in the bank. And I went to my grandfather, who was an entrepreneur and had lots of businesses over the years, and said, look, I've got this idea, I want to start a gym. And he said, look, I'll loan you some money, but it's going to be at an interest rate and you have to pay me back within 2 years. Me thinking, yeah, my granddad, it's not really a loan, he's not going to make me pay, but he did every single month collect his interest and make sure I was paying. And it's probably one of the best things I ever learned, that it was, I never got anything for nothing back then. So I got that money from him, which allowed me to then borrow money from National Australia Bank. So I borrowed $150,000 from NAB to start the gym. And the business was a great business. We got it as big as we could in a short period of time, but it was something that I wasn't overly passionate. It's very long hours in gyms, as you'd know, sort of 6 a.m. till 10 p.m, and you can't make a huge amount of money. So I ended up selling that business 18 months later. It was an interesting time. I think Steve, my dad passed away 2 months after I opened the gym doors, and I lost 3 grandparents in the next month after that. And it was a very tough time for me and my family, and I sort of had to make the decision, was I going to fall over on my debt to NAB and be bankrupt at 19 or 20, or was I really going to dig in and have a real crack at what I needed to do to make myself a man and protect my family and step up? And that was a key driver for me. So that sort of set my business diligence and how I work and work ethic and grunt. So that really drove me to then property. So then I went and worked for a company called FKP, big public company, which I completely hated. I was not good at being told what to do at all. It's just probably like you. And I lasted there for about 9 months, and I went and approached this guy called Maury Schwartz. So Maury, who does a lot around this area, was a big developer at the time, doing some really, really different stuff. And so I started with him the next day. He'd never employed anyone at that time. Started with him, and he was and still is an incredible mentor to me. He's not the best business person in the world because he's much too creative and interested in too many things to be too focused on business, but taught me the importance of marketing and brand and having confidence in yourself to really do great things. So without him, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today, without doubt. Without Tony and him in particular, I've had 2 very important mentors. And Maury had a couple of issues at the time up with some property up at the Snow, which you might have read about back in the day. And there was an opportunity for me to roll up my sleeves and really try to help him there, which we did. And after that, he gave me a percentage of the business. So I was able to get a percentage of Pan Urban at the time, which was my first sort of step into a form of ownership in development. We did some great projects together. GFC hit. He decided that the big projects in the city were still going to be okay. I had a bit of a different view. I thought it was going to get pretty tough. I remember still like it was yesterday when the Lehman Brothers guys are walking out with the boxes, and I thought, geez, this is getting pretty serious. And so I started a business called Urban Inc. with another guy, Danny, at the time. And the theory with that was we wanted to do 10 projects of 30, diversify as opposed to 1 of 300. So at the time we were using other investors' money, so private investors were investing with us, and we slowly built up over time. And people say to me, oh, you've done so much in a short period of time, like overnight success. For me, it's overnight success in 17 years of brutal work. So it's not, it has been quite a slow, long journey. It just might appear to others that it's come quickly.
And I guess you're about to enter into your biggest project, if I'm not wrong, Fisherman's Bend. You got $1 billion part of the action there.
Yeah.
80,000 people are going to be moving in there.
Yeah.
480 hectare. It's basically a new suburb for Melbourne.
Yeah.
In your view, how can we ensure that we don't make the same mistakes as Docklands and South Bank, where beautiful apartments, but there's totally soulless, and we're playing catch up with schools and infrastructure and childcare and all the rest of it? I mean, do you think that's just the government's responsibility? You've got nothing to do with that. That's not your problem, so to speak. Or I mean, how do you see it's going to pan out at Fisherman's Bend?
Yeah, I think Docklands it's a shame. I think it will be great in the end, but it has taken too long to get there. Absolutely, it's the developer's responsibility. Absolutely, it's the government and the community. I think, like you've seen here in City of Yarra, this whole developer versus community versus council is just the most stupid. It's totally irrational and doesn't get the best outcome. For something like Fisherman's Bend to work, there has to be the parks plan, there has to be the schools plan, there has to be the trams plan, trains plan, and I think they've tried to do that this time. Definitely tried probably better than we did at Docklands back in the day. The only thing I'd say is there's this, and what people don't see, and everyone just thinks it's big, rich developers, which is completely not the case. Most developers actually don't make much money, and a lot of them go under, because it is a very, very hard game. What has to happen is the governments and the authorities need to work with the developers and work out ways to give them extra yield or extra height or extra revenue for contributions to other things. So affordable housing, obviously a big thing in your world, and social housing. Every developer is willing to do it if they can afford to do it. So coming in and saying, okay, you've got to do 7% affordable housing or 20% affordable housing without any give and take just doesn't work, because the numbers financially simply won't work. Whereas in the UK and the US, firstly in the US, they've obviously got visas that help people build affordable housing. But in the UK, they say to the developer, okay, you can do 10 stories with no affordable housing. We'll let you do 14 if you put 20% affordable housing in. And it actually becomes a commercial model that can work for the developer. Most developers I know actually do care and actually do want to give back, but at the same time, we work on pretty thin margins and we have to be able to make things work. So forcing open space and forcing those things on developers just simply doesn't work.
Have you been offered anything by the state government in terms of extra height in return for affordable housing? Or,
I haven't even had a phone call, no.
Yeah.
So as you know, I know you're close to Richard Wynne, but I've tried to talk to Richard Wynne quite a lot. It is difficult to get access to the Planning Minister or his advisors. I found out about our approval through the newspapers, so I didn't even find out through the Minister's office. We're on the front row of Fisherman's Bend, as you know, so we are the front site and we're a very major site. Yeah, we did work hand in hand with them through the entire process, absolutely, and in the design process there was some really good conversations, but the conversation was never, it has to be 8% affordable housing. What can we do to help you make that a reality? It will be 8% affordable housing, it will be this social housing.
So density controls, basically, that sort of way of looking at,
correct,
like they do in Vancouver and Hong Kong, New York.
It's got to be give and take. The developer should be forced to do some things and should be encouraged to do them, but maybe forced isn't the right word, maybe it's encouraged. We will give you extra space or whatever it is if you do contribute back to the community, which I think any good developer actually wants to.
You're doing a lot of work in Queensland at the moment, and you've said that the Gold Coast about to enter its biggest property run ever. I found that quite surprising, insofar as we've had this slowdown with COVID and so on.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's taken place? I mean, I know there are a lot of cranes there at the moment.
It's interesting. I was up there Thursday, Friday, looking at our site, and the number of agents that we spoke to that said that we just do not have enough product for the number of buyers right now. I mean, COVID's been if you interviewed me in March last year, I would tell you that I'm very confident property prices are going to correct 10 to 20%. And probably not a bad thing, to be honest. I probably think it wouldn't have been a bad thing because it needs to reset at some time. I was completely wrong. Now I think we'll be up 10 to 15% at least this year, and we'll be in boom conditions, which is what we're seeing now. I think what we all misread was how much money travels overseas each year. So the amount of money that goes to Europe, America, Asia, that is now here, and people are spending it here. So people are saying, haven't spent whatever, 20, 30, 100 grand in Europe or America this year. Therefore, I can actually go and invest in an apartment in the Gold Coast. And I want to get out of Melbourne. I need to get to some heat. And that's what's pushing the market up there. And I can tell you the sentiment up there was extremely optimistic.
Oh, that's interesting. The first time we met was when you bought a piece of land on the north side of Queen's Parade in North Fitzroy. You wanted to go 16 stories. There was no.
I had no grey hair then before that one.
Well, you know, that's the pressure. This is the question I have actually, because up until then, you're a developer. You have to deal with banks. You have to deal with clients. You have to deal with construction companies. But I guess it seemed to me, at least, this is the first time that you had to face sort of a very organised community in a marginal seat that had some political power, political weight that they brought to bear on this development. So you wanted 16 stories. I mean, to be fair, you were in your rights to ask to go as high as you wanted, because there were no controls over that site whatsoever. Yep. The community wanted 8.
Yep.
And then there was massive community mobilisation, big public meetings, pressure on the council. And then Richard Wynne brought in the interim controls a couple of days before VCAT. I mean, that must have been a new experience for you, facing up against not just a planning minister, the local MP, who was, I suppose, waged a bit by the community, but also a very, very organised community that got I think you, at the end, you got 10 stories at the end, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yep.
I think the community wanted 8, you wanted 12, you ended up with 10, from memory. So what's your thoughts about that in hindsight?
Yeah, I think, look, we deal with objectors all the time. As you know, I met with about 150 objectors there, and every single one ended up withdrawing their objection, and we found a great mediated position. The disappointing thing with North Fitzroy was it became personal. People were attacking me personally, as you know. There was a pretty serious hate page created against me, as if it was my fault. I think what people misunderstood about this site is it is designated for height and for density, and what we did would have been seen as a very normal and, we thought, very highly arguable position of what we originally submitted. Now, we went for a design that was more out there. We thought it was a good design for the building. Clearly, people didn't think it was, right, from an urban design perspective, and I think it's important the community has that say. I think the thing that was very difficult about that process is, you know, conflicts of interest worry me in planning. When you've got a planning minister whose council it is, who the people who elect him to be next planning minister or not are the ones that are sitting there saying you need to stop this development, and when he turns up to meetings, I think it's controversial. He won't meet with me, so he didn't get any two sides of the story. I think any form of one-sided planning is an issue, and I don't think political intervention should ever happen in a seat where you sit, which is Richard Wynne's seat, obviously in Sydney.
So what would be the alternative, in your view?
It should have gone through the normal process. It should have been negotiated through council. Everyone would have had their normal say, and it would have gone to VCAT, and VCAT would have been able to make the decision based on its merits. Now,
but he could have still called it in as minister if he'd wanted to, even if it had gone to VCAT.
But
which he's done at times.
He should also, but maybe you should look at abstaining from ones where there is political issues associated with it.
I understand what you're saying. I guess from the community perspective, they would say, well, then we would be the ones victimised by living in the planning minister's seat.
Yeah, but I think he could call it in and have other people involved. It could have got the government, could have got the architects, government architects involved as an example. It wasn't, you know,
because 3 times he's brought in interim controls in Yarra on your developments.
All mine.
Yeah. No, well,
I feel very lucky.
You know, I don't think it's luck or bad luck. I do think it's the strength of the community here and putting pressure on the planning minister and on the council. And, you know, sometimes you've had to...
The only thing with that is...
Take not a defeat, but at least, less than what you originally wanted.
Yeah. I mean, he's never done it in any other council, right? So that's the issue that me and my advisors had, which is, I think when there's political motivation in there, it's a very dangerous ground. And as you know, we lodged the Supreme Court against him for... I can't remember what it was at the time, but misuse of political power, I think it was. It was something that I did. I knew we were never going to win that. There was no chance it was ever going to be something we could win. I did it because I thought it was important that power wasn't misused, I guess is my point. Now, irrelevant to the planning, I have no issue with the planning minister. It's a very tough role. I don't envy him at all, and I think he does some great things. I think he does some things I don't agree with, but that's normal, right? I don't have an issue with Richard at all. You know, I think the process with North Fitzroy was unfortunate because it became personalised and attacking, where there's whatever there was, 300 objectors. We've had sites with more objections than that before. It's just these guys took it to a very personal position as opposed to let's sit down and work out what can actually be done here. I offered to meet with them multiple times. They didn't want to meet with me. So there's a position where, yes, you might be an objector and you want to get the best outcome, but are you doing it for the best outcome, or are you doing it because you enjoy the controversy of it? And we felt that there wasn't much give and take between us. Now, they might say the same about me. So as I think you know, I meet with all of our objectives always in every site. So I think that's really important that the community and the developer try to work together to find an outcome, to take a bit of pressure off council too, because I don't think it can all be sitting on council's hands. I don't think anyone would look back at that process we've been through at Queen's Parade and think it was a successful process. Council's has probably been okay, but it's been a challenge. You know, we just finished our third VCAT case. It was an 8-day VCAT case finished 2 weeks ago. So it's been an incredibly expensive and difficult and stressful exercise for everyone.
Just on a different topic, we had John Setkin here on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I just wonder, when it gets to the stage where you've got a development and you have to choose a construction company, why would you, if I was a developer, I mean, just looking at it purely from a financial perspective, you would just think, well, I'll just go for the cheapest builder I can get my hands on. But you often use builders that have got an enterprise bargaining agreement with the CFMU, for example, Hamilton Marino, Hickory, and I'd imagine they'd be slightly more expensive than your Paces of the world and others. So why do you do that? I mean, I think it's good. We speaking as a CFMU rank and filer, we want to see more flags on the cranes and EBA rates and higher wages for me and better conditions for me than on a non-union job. Why do you as a developer sometimes choose a more expensive construction company that has an EBA with the CFMU rather than one that doesn't?
Yeah, I think simply for us, we're trying to build a brand that's sustainable and long term. So it's something that, you know, we promise big things to our buyers, as you know. We promise very ambitious projects, and we need to make sure they're delivered without people falling over. And builders in particular, you know, there's been tough times for builders over the last 20 years in different cycles, and the EBA guys are the guys that are more structured, they're more strategic, they have bigger balance sheets, they have a plan and a purpose, and I guess for us, we need all of them to complete well, and I think the unions do create a level of sophistication and force the builders to be a bit more serious. Now, we've got a couple of non-unions in a much smaller space, but 95% of our jobs will be union.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Just with COVID, I noticed in one of the financial papers that you said that you've had 99% settlement despite COVID. And how have you pulled that off?
I don't know, to be honest. I was very nervous in March. We assumed it was going to be a disaster. We were worried, how would valuers get through, how do banks get through, how do we even get the purchasers through? We try to create a really special product. I mean, Spanish Club is a beautiful building that the community have always really loved, the buyers really love.
When's the club moving in there, by the way? Do you know?
So they're in there. They're in.
Okay.
They've just
on
got
the ground floor.
The front space they're struggling to lease. So they're trying to lease that to get some commercial income. But the club is open at the back there, so it's fully functioning, which is great. But so we're very fortunate. It went really well, and I think it's a product-based thing. People, when you get to the end of the building and it's as good as what we told you day one, then people still do want to proceed, which is great.
You said also with COVID that you personally are doing 20 to 40% less travel. And I know a lot of builders around here have been saying to council, you know, we've got offices we can't sell. Can we get it rezoned so that we can turn them into apartments, do something with them? They're just sitting there idle. Yeah. What impacts do you think that COVID, in terms of travel, but also in terms of the possibility of offices being turned into homes? Obviously, in some cases, they'll have to be rezoning. Yeah. Do you think that's something that will need to be looked at in the medium term?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think it's probably too early to call yet. I think that the suburban, I think areas like Collingwood, Fitzroy, I mean, this pocket, as you know, I love it, and I think it's probably the hottest commercial and resi market by far in Melbourne right now, because it's got the old heritage, it's got the charm, it's got the character that everyone loves, and I think a lot of the CBD office buildings and those workers will force the businesses to push out to the suburbs where they don't have lifts and they don't have to have that, you know, public transport into town. I think that will be a big pressure point. I think, you know, there's a lot of talk at the moment about empty office buildings, and is that going to continue? My feeling is when immigration gets going again next year, we will get back to normal. You know, there's a lot of people out there saying that immigration won't get back to normal, and you know, how you're going to change your business. My view is, if immigration doesn't get back to where it was, forget about my business. No one has a job. There'll be no jobs in Victoria, and there'll be no jobs in Australia, because we are a country that is reliant on immigration that fuels jobs. So I try to take the view that the government's not silly enough to think that immigration's not coming back, so it will come back, and most likely it will come back and they'll push it very, very hard, and we're going to look like a country that has managed the situation very, very well. You know, we're sitting here doing this when most other countries are locked down, and I think immigration will be pumped even harder than where it is now. So I think then that will get the commerce going again, or get the office busy again, and I think we'll enter a bit of a boom in a couple of years.
Just wanted to talk to you about the contradictions in that boom, because on the one hand, you know, developers are doing well, construction companies are doing well. And, you know, speaking as a construction worker, we really haven't had a downturn since 1990. I mean, it's been unparalleled. You know, we've got the highest wages of any construction worker in the Western world, the safest conditions, but most importantly, it's been boom conditions since 1990, with the exception, obviously, of the ups and downs of COVID. But then, you know, in the 2 years before 2018, I think it was 250,000 homes were built in Melbourne, and it's probably the same again in the next 2 years. Yet there's record numbers homeless. We've got people suffering rental stress. We've got people couch surfing. We've got young people finding it more difficult than ever to buy a home. Yeah. I mean, do you accept that there's, you know, a contradiction between capitalism and the system that we live under, building all these homes, and yet we've still got this problem for so many, especially young people? I mean, do you see that like that as I would, as a socialist?
A massive problem.
I mean, and do you take any responsibility for that? Do you think that's a government problem, or I mean, what's your view on that?
It's everyone's problem. We all should be taking responsibility for it, of course. I think the big misconception in what the property market does for affordability is, you know, I find it really interesting when people say the Chinese came here and forced prices up. What the Chinese actually did when they came here was created a huge amount of supply that let housing not run rampant in terms of price. What people forget is that the property market is simply dictated by supply and demand. If demand exceeds supply, prices go up. If there's more supply than demand, prices come down. So in, you know, the City of Yarra is a prime example, right? The council are very, very hard to get approvals here. It's virtually impossible nowadays. You know, council is restricting supply significantly, and all that is going to do is significantly increase prices over the next 10 years. So the easiest way to get affordability back into the market is to actually let a large amount of supply through the gates. You need to have excess supply to demand, otherwise prices will just continue to boom and boom. And you know, I find it really interesting, the City of Yarra, I think the target was 20,000 people, new people by 2030, is that the number?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way the planning system's going in City of Yarra, it'll be 2,000, like it'll be nowhere near 20, and there'll be 20,000 people wanting to come here, but there'll be 2,000 approvals, and prices will just run through the roof. So if you want to look at it from macro or even a micro perspective, the only way to get affordable housing and outside of government help, is actually to have more supply. There needs to be more supply, so demand and pressure comes off it. You look at the auction markets at the moment, there's nothing on the market, and we're talking now we're in a housing boom or bubble because there's no supply and there's thousands and thousands of people trying to buy homes. So that will only continue until councils and the community, and it's as much the community that elect the councillors, realise that affordable housing comes through supply. It's not the opposite.
But even if you double the amount of the supply of apartments in Yarra, in Melbourne, in Australia, the price is an issue.
But price is dictated by supply and demand.
But with things like inclusionary zoning, where you've got a built-in low-cost percentage of low-cost units in a larger development, not mum and dad building an extra room at the back, but a development over a certain size. We have that in many countries of the world. We have little bits of it around in Yarra, the 20% aiming at the gas and fuel side. I think it's 6% of the exam course side. You know, but it's very, very rare. I mean, what would you say if the state government said, all right, we're going to mandate inclusionary zoning for all developers, not just you, on all developments over a certain size?
I think it depends on what you're talking about. There's social, there's affordable, and there's key worker sort of housing. So I think the easiest of all of it is probably that key worker, that $50,000 to $90,000 wage bracket. That is something that could easily be dictated into developments. Where it does cause issues, if you go and dictate that social housing has to be a part of every single project, then you cannot do high-end accommodation. So it just totally dictates you can't do a 107 Cambridge Street and try to get the partners of KPMG or EY or those white-collar workers will not share in a 90 apartment building with social housing. So the social housing mix with luxury or higher-end apartments is it's a big challenge. And I think that is something the government has to lead. I think the key worker, like NRAS, I mean, NRAS was a really good policy, and NRAS got a lot of accommodation out there for that lower income bracket of important workers. That's an easier one to tackle, but what makes it impossible for us is when the government or councillors say 8% social housing or 8% affordable housing in a building of 300, the building just won't go ahead because the buyers will not buy in there. They won't buy with a 20% mix of social housing. It's as simple as that.
Do you think that the state government should build more public housing?
Absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
100,000 odd on the queue.
I mean, as you know it better than me, but I mean, Europe and America have some amazing systems set up for developers who can develop affordable and social housing. They make a lot less money than in a commercial venture, but allows them to construct and be part of the process. There needs to be a partnership with, even what's just recently come out with the couple of $1 billion worth of social and affordable housing. No one understands it. I don't know if you understand it, but they're sort of saying, we're going to come to you and we're going to buy your site off you and we're going to build it. They don't know how they're going to build it, who's going to build it, what's the actual process. Not once did they come and sit down with the top developers and say, we need to bring along 20,000 affordable housing in the next 5 years. How can we do it? What do we do together? You're the guys with the planning expertise, the building expertise. How do we do this? No one's once called me, ever, from the government. And I'd sit down with them tomorrow and we'd be able to sort a solution for how do we actually help them get to the next level. And you and I have talked about locations where we could do it, and with the skill set council have and with what we have, it needs to be a public partnership with privates who understand how to actually deliver things.
So the type of public housing, not necessarily the architecturally speaking, but the straight out 100% state-owned public housing like we see down the road here at Fitzroy, North Richmond, Collingwood and all the rest of it, you agree that should be expanded for those people who cannot access even lower end private apartments because they're way out of their price range.
100%. And not only should it be provided, it should be provided to the demands that are there. Right? I mean, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but the numbers of people that don't have housing in the waiting list, it's such a funny one.
Around 80,000 or so, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a frightening number. Like 80,000, that is a lot of buildings to build, and it's a lot of infrastructure, and it's a lot of space. They need to get very serious about that. That's not a turnaround thing that's going to be turned on quickly. Like, they need people that can very quickly get those apartments to construction. And the other thing is be doing it where it's not going to blow out 3 times on budget, actually deliver it to budgets. And the best people are going to be able to do that is the public and private developers, and why not work with them?
In some parts of the world, and it's something that I've argued for here, where in the private apartment market, where apartments are built and they're not lived in by the owner, that they have to pay higher rates to encourage not just like empty buildings. So, I'm living in one at the moment where I'm probably the only person on the floor that's living there. So
is that because it's not because you're there, is it?
Maybe that's it. Maybe you've just burst my little bubble there. But do you think that? What's your view of that? I mean, when an investor just buys an apartment,
so we've got the foreign
and
tax,
just sits on it,
So there's the foreign that for the foreigners they have to pay 1.5%, I think it is, as an absentee tax. Look, I think it's an interesting one. I don't think it solves the problem. Like, I think the numbers the media talk about, how many of them there are, is not right. I mean, right now with COVID, the vacancy rates aren't a problem. Obviously, with COVID, vacancies are now 10 to 20%, and there's lots of available rental stock out there. I think it's got to be very specifically targeted to who we're trying to attract. So if it is social housing, that needs to be accommodated, and that is really something the government need to really focus on. And if it's 80,000 homes, that's a lot. That's a lot of change that has to happen. So there's real focus there. I think that the key worker status stuff with the teachers and nurses, that to me feels like an easy solution. I think NRAS for that was a really good solution. It incentivised investors to provide housing for people in that wage bracket. I think those kind of things can work really well, and it functioned and it worked because it was give and take on both sides. It gave developers something, it gave the community what they needed, and it gave the politics what they needed to actually get things off the ground. So I'm not convinced I don't think there's as many apartments as what people think that are empty.
Okay. With climate change, we had a report recently at the City of Yarra that said that 84% of all emissions in Yarra, not from waste, not from vehicular traffic, it's from stationary energy, the powering of our buildings, our offices, our homes, with fossil fuel derived energy. So if we had mandated carbon neutral energy on construction sites over a certain size, I mean, I think that could overnight massively lower emission rates in the City of Yarra and in Melbourne as a whole. I notice at 2656 Queen's Parade, you've got a carbon neutral energy policy there. mean, what's your view on that? Do you think that that would be good policy for government to mandate that?
I think it's a balance, right? So if you do it, apartment prices will go up by 5 to 10%. So all the developers are doing is taking their construction cost base, all their cost base, adding a margin, which is between 15 and 20%, which is what we have to make for the banks. And if cost goes up, which being carbon neutral cost definitely goes up, at least 10% on the construction price, apartment prices will simply go up, rents will go up. So again, it's not just an easy fix of saying, okay, everyone's carbon neutral, because you'll then have another problem of affordability going through the roof. Again, the simplest way to do it is, I'm a bit different. We've made a business decision that we want to try to be carbon neutral on every single project, right? And that's not an easy thing to do, but that's something I've decided, for my next generation, my kids and their kids, it's an important thing for me, and us as a business, we've decided that's what we want to do. I can tell you most developers won't do that. It is an extremely costly exercise, and you have to make a qualitative decision that you're willing to make less to make it happen. So one solution to it is similar to the affordable housing is, it's got to be give and take. So, you want 4 stories on your site, we'll give you 5 stories if it's carbon neutral and you give us 5% affordable housing. There has to be give and take, or otherwise every bit of cost you add will just add to construction prices, which then adds to revenues and prices.
The question that I have to ask is just this avocado sandwich thing. I mean, I was in America a couple of years ago and people had heard about it. I mean, I've got the quote here somewhere. We're coming into a new reality here where a lot of people, this is you talking, a lot of people won't own a house in their lifetime. That's just the reality. Do you believe that young people will never own a home? Absolutely. When you're spending $40 a day on smashed avocados and coffees not working, of course that's going to happen. And that the whole thing just went viral at the time. So what's your take on all of that? I mean, expand on what you were trying to say there.
It was a classic media. They managed it very well for their own benefit. I did a 4.5-hour interview, so I got asked to do an interview with Malcolm Turnbull, Harry Triggerboff and me about an update on the property market. And I said, Harry's an idol of our industry, and obviously Malcolm was Prime Minister at the time. And so we did a 4.5-hour interview, and we went to a couple of sites and they interviewed like this. We talked about everything, absolutely everything, and we spent 0.1% of the time on this one topic. Like literally it was a 30-second conversation, and he said, what do you think about the next generation? Exactly what the question you're asking before about affordability. I said, look, it is going to be brutal. It's going to be very, very tough, and it's something we need to find a solution for. And he said, what do you think about the millennial generation? I said, look, you can't be travelling to Europe every year, have to have the latest BMW, have 3 coffees a day and smashed avocado on toast for, I think I said $28 or $18 or whatever it was. They cut out that whole front section about the holiday and the latest BMW and the latest iPhone and focused on smashed avocado. And it was funny, I'd said to the PR girls before that were helping me sort of prepare for it, because it was a big interview at the time, we've got to make sure that we just stay on topic and don't let it be turned into something else, because 60 minutes is a risk, as you'd know. It was something that, in hindsight, probably shouldn't have done, because they do try to create a story out of whatever angle they can find. And we got to the end of it, and I thought, the girls said we did a great job, it was perfect, everything was on topic, no issues. And then on the Sunday there was the preview for the that night's show, and it said, multi-millionaire smashes millennials, and I go, oh no, what is going on? And then it sort of aired, and I'm like, holy shit, they were so clever in the way they turned it from what the interview was to what it looked like. And I said it, absolutely, I said those comments, but it was in the context of holidays, iPhones and everything else. And the next day it wasn't that big a deal. And then a girl called Susie O'Brien from the Herald Sun wrote this piece with the headline, "Rolled Gold Wanker Smashes Millennials." And I thought, wow, that's full on. And I put it on LinkedIn and said, Susie O'Brien, here's my mobile number. If you ever want to talk to me before you write about me, make sure you call me. And my LinkedIn it literally blew up. There was like 300,000 comments in like 24 hours. And then the next day it went everywhere. I mean, it actually made me, it took me about 72 hours and I literally fell apart, because we had London, Ireland, US, media was simply insane. They were out the front of our office, out the front of my home. And it was interesting because in America, avocado on toast is $6. Probably even cheaper.
Yeah, right.
So I think they were just thinking, what the hell is this? It doesn't make any sense at all. And I think it just touched on it wasn't. I don't think it was that it was me. It was the timing of the millennial conversation. And the interesting thing is, as you know, the social media trolls that are so dangerous and so scary in what they say about people were incredibly brutal. And some of the stuff I read about myself was just unbelievable and completely untrue and not founded. But on the flip side, I reckon 98% of people of me, like I had so many people call me agreeing, saying, look, I'd love my son to come and talk to you, or my sister, my daughter to come and talk to you, because they're exactly what you're talking about. They're saving nothing. They're spending all their money on social media and all this stuff that's not going to add to their lives. So I think the majority of the public understood the context and understood what it was about. But yeah, it was actually a really tough time on me and my family. It was brutal, absolutely brutal.
I just wonder what the impact of, I mean, you said earlier on in the interview that at one stage you were down to a couple of K in your bank account, and now you clearly got a little bit more than that. I mean, according to if you believe Google, 600 million plus, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like if it's 100 million plus minus, it's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
So do you still have friends from school? Do you find that it's hard to know, to judge people, that people treat you differently? Like they laugh at all your jokes. They try to be. They want you to like them.
Yeah.
And everyone's trying to cut a deal with you, where it'd be hard to cross swords with you when you got $600 million in the bank or whatever it is. I mean, do you find that it's affected your relationships? I don't mean your wife and kids. I'm talking about your friendship network.
I think it has the potential to destroy relationships 100%. But fortunately, I've got an amazing wife who keeps me very calm and stable. So every weekend we're down at our farm and we're out. We don't spend much time in Melbourne at all on the weekends, which keeps us really simple. We have a very simple life with my kids and my wife. I'm very fortunate that my schoolmates and I are still very, very close, always have been. I don't think the wealth side of it's an issue. The press side of it's probably more challenging. You turn up and your mate from school we used to beat each other up says, oh yeah, you're wanker, you're on the front page of this, you're on the front page of that, I can't get away from you. There's that element, but I think any good friend who really cares about you from day one and remembers who you are and why you're that, and they know I haven't actually changed. Like I haven't deep down changed at all. I've probably become more of an introvert. I probably do less than I used to do in the old days. So I think your genuine friends 100% are still there, and it's exactly what it was. I think it's, sometimes you get people as you would in your position that come trying to get things because of your position. I don't like that. It's, that is difficult, and you'd get it more than I would. Anyone who has I
doubt that very much, but anyway.
Well, but a public position where people can feel like they can get things from you, it is, that's probably more of the challenge. But, my good mates that I've been friends with for 20 years, it's still exactly the same. We're at the pub Friday before last. It could have been exactly the same as what we were 22 years ago. No difference.
How long do you think this boom's going to last? I mean, us construction workers are, hoping it just keeps going forever. I mean, will we still keep getting 100,000 people coming into Melbourne, which seems to be the driver for the construction boom? I mean, how long do you think it's going to go for?
Yeah.
It's unparalleled in construction history that we haven't had a downturn since the early 90s.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding the little slowdown last year.
Yeah, I think last year everyone was nervous, no question. Yeah. The builders are very nervous and the developers. I think it's all going to come back to immigration. So if we can't get people back here next year, it will be a major problem, no question. So if the vaccine doesn't do what they think it's going to do, and if the governments don't get proactive at getting the students back, I mean, we've lost 60,000 students from the CBD. We don't develop in the CBD, but the ripple effects of that through the community are huge. To the cafe operators, to the bus drivers, to the train drivers, to the apartments in Collingwood, it does have a massive ripple effect. So I think immigration is key. They have to fix that, and they've got to fix it quickly. If it was up to me, I'd be doing something very proactive now to get students back. I mean, you've got universities that are going under. We are a city that has been built on great education, and we need to be able to keep those universities propped up. So it's all about immigration. If immigration comes back, I think we'll actually have a boom. Again, I think it will run very hard. If immigration doesn't come back, it will be an absolute devastating disaster.
What about the growing tensions between America and China and between China and Australia? I mean, obviously, you'd have to call it really a sort of a mini trade war at the moment between Australia and China. And what's your worry? Do you have worries that could trigger a recession and that could be disastrous for Australia?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not quite sure yet is the answer. I think it's it's of course a massive concern. I mean, it's shooting the golden goose in a sense. I don't really understand. I'm sure ScoMo's got a very good reason for what he's doing, and I think, the interesting thing about Trump, obviously most people love or hate him, but he's the first person to really stand up to China and say, hang on guys, this is, it's too one way, we need a balance here. And I think that was a good thing for the world. I mean, now he does it his own way, but I understand everyone needs to tell China we do have a say, but at the same time they're an incredibly important trading partner and someone that we should be really nurturing in terms of relationship as well. So it is a balance. I mean, people saying, oh, it's fine, China, we won't use China, we'll go to all the other, Vietnam, Malaysia and Singapore, and we'll just turn that on overnight. I mean, it takes 20, 30, 40 years to do that. So it's a concern, and it's something they should be thinking about.
The reconfiguration of the economic relation between Trump, America, prior to Biden, obviously, and China has been China, to a certain degree, America throwing Australia under the bus a bit, and China said, yeah, fine, we'll buy more American stuff, and we've been, Australia's suffered a bit from that. And I just wonder whether, this dilemma that the people who run this country have between their historic political ties to America and their growing economic ties to China, like how that's going to play out. It's probably the biggest issue that, and God forbid, a trade war even into some type of military conflict.
It's the thing to watch. I mean, it's everything, isn't it? I mean, it's the next 10 to 20, probably to 50 years will be about what China does with the world. I mean, they are going to be a huge power in the world. They're clearly trying to centralise their economy a bit more and rely less on the world, and that's going to have massive ramifications. And I love multiculturalism in Australia. I think it's a great thing, and I think that the Chinese coming exactly like the Italians did and the Greeks did and the Scottish did, I think it's a great thing for multiculturalism. And I'm pro anyone coming to this country. I think it's a great thing. If they want to be here and embrace the culture, embrace what Australia's about, we should be encouraging it.
You spoke about Trump. Just before Trump became president, you're quoted in the Financial Review saying that you'd met Donald Trump at the time. He was the real estate tycoon, not president of America. And you said, he's so unbelievably normal. He gave me a glass of water in a plastic cup. I asked him if he would consider investing in Melbourne or Brisbane, and he said he would, but only if it was the perfect product. He's looking at licensing out the Trump brand. I mean, now that he's unemployed, I mean, do you think that you'd try to get him back here again as a co-investor?
I don't think you'd be rushing now. It's interesting. I mean, at that time, that was a long time ago now. It was a year before he ran for president, and he would have had, without doubt, the strongest residential brand in the world. He was known as the best luxury residential developer, and yes, he's always had his stories about him and all of that, but he was a very strong brand, and whenever he put the Trump brand to something, it meant something. But no, I don't think anyone would go anywhere near it right now.
Do you think that you might ever get into politics?
Absolutely no chance.
But okay, fair enough. But if you were, I mean, if you were the planning minister, and you have this boom that you want to keep going, you've got obviously a lot of young people who can't afford to buy homes. As I said before, the cart surfing, the homelessness, the rental stress, and so on. I think rents in the last few years have gone up twice the rate of CPI. What would your policies be if you were if you had Richard Wynn's job for a year?
Well, first, I mean, the biggest thing I'll be doing firstly is dealing with the private companies. So not just the private, but the publics too. I mean, there has to be. I don't understand this theory of the big bad developer. I mean, the developers are the ones delivering the product for people to house in, right? So you have to work how government and communities and local councils are scared of working with developers. It has to change, right? We are no different to how the retailers bring coffees to the masses. We bring housing to the masses, and we've got to be part of the conversation. I think, I think it really needs to be broken down very carefully. I think social housing is something that, there is definitely public partnerships that can be done with the private industry, but at the moment there's no focus on it, zero. So I think that's one sector that has to be focused on. There's then the affordable housing bit, which needs to be focused on, and there's definitely something that can be done in partnership with developers, but it has to be give and take. Fisherman's been coming in and saying you're going to pay $27,000 per apartment for infrastructure costs, and you're going to do 7% affordable housing. Every single developer, their one bedrooms were $450, now they're $550. And how the government doesn't say why they can't see that adding costs, it's not like we make infinite money where we can just do whatever we want. We have a margin we have to make, and it's usually pretty thin, and then you have to put prices up to deal with increased costs. So there has to be that working together. I think like I'm a big fan of the Melbourne 2030 plan, the old central, the sort of the high street concept of Rob. I think it was Rob Adams at the time. I'm not a big advocate for developing in the green streets. I think the side streets of Melbourne are really important, and I think it can deal with 2 or 3 levels, but I don't think that should be 5 or 6 levels through the green streets. I think we've got great opportunity along all our high streets to bring in 5, 6, 7, 8 stories through those high streets and on the major strategic sites. Like Queen's Parade's a prime example. That is a site, I think looking back in 20 years' time, people will go, geez, that's underdeveloped for what the region actually needs. Because North Fitzroy is an example. There's not many development sites, right? But hundreds of thousands of people want to live there. So it's all good for people in, the people in their backyard saying, we don't want anyone else here, but that's because they're there. All the people that want to get in want to be there. It's not.
But I guess a lot of people want to live there because of the historic shopping strips and the village atmosphere, and you can destroy the goose that lays the golden egg.
Yeah, of course.
If you along Queen's Parade where the shops are, if you went 5, 6, 8, 10 stories there, it wouldn't be Queen's Parade anymore.
But it's going to change. It has to change. We've got to. It's chicken before the egg. If you want affordable housing, you need money for the government. That money comes from stamp duty and taxes. You can't get that money unless developers are actively doing things. So you can't have continued construction wage growth without the builders busy. The builders have to be able to create housing for the population that's coming in. So if population's coming in, they have to go somewhere. And the solution isn't just to throw everyone 20, 30K out of the CBD. That's a disaster.
But there's plenty of development sites in Yarra that aren't, historic shopping strips, like South Collingwood, for example, Cremorne, and places like that, and that's why there are cranes all over there. And we can have our arguments that develop, not you personally, but developers and the community over the height and so on. But it seems to me that's perfect place to go up Wellington Street's another totally appropriate place for development.
How do you answer the issue of Smith Street's pretty dead, Johnson Street's dead, Chapel Street's dead, Bridge Road's dead, Fitzroy Street's dead. There are no retailers making any money. It's completely impossible because there's no one there anymore. So how do you revive those shopping strips that are all completely dead?
I think there's a lot of land banking taking place, and I think, especially say down in Victoria Street, there's a change like from restaurants into clubs and retail, just like Bridge Road has changed in the last 10 years.
Yeah, but it's dead. I mean, every second shop's for lease. I think the councillors and the community...
But if you were to, But I think that could change in the next few years, and the number of people that are moving in to Fitzroy and to Collingwood. I mean, you know better than I do. I mean, there's cranes everywhere here. They're going to shop here.
But that's the whole point. It's the development and the density that brings the shops back. You can't have these strips with no development and no density because there's no one here to activate them. I mean, I can tell you I own a fair bit of retail through Collingwood. Most people are not paying their rent, or they're way behind. In terms of retailers, no one's making money. It is brutally hard, and the council have to care about the survival of the main streets, and not just care by protecting. It's not just about protecting heritage. Heritage is really important. I love one of the biggest reasons why I'm in Collingwood is the heritage, but the heritage means nothing if the businesses can't thrive and actually make money. And you speak to any restaurateur or cafe at the moment, none of them are making money. None of them can pay their rent, none of them can afford to be there, and they're all going broke. So there has to be a solution. Yes, the streets have to be protected, but the streets mean nothing if there's no one making money.
Yeah, but I think that the reason that most of for example, the nighttime economy around here, which is a huge part of the Yarra economy, is suffering is because of COVID. It's not because of the lack of people that are moving into the area.
You reckon?
And as soon as they opened, they just went gangbusters again. But
yeah, they're all still not paying rent, I can tell you.
All right, well...
Yeah, like it's. I mean, we work very closely with our retail partners because we want to support them and make sure their business is a success. And I know how brutally hard it is for them. And it's not because we're charging above market rents. We're market on every single rent deal that we have. It is so hard for retailers and coffee shops and bars and everyone to make money unless you are purely alcohol focused. None of the cafes are making money. I mean, you know them, you're talking to them. There'd be maybe a couple Proud Marys, there'd be a couple that are doing well.
No, they're doing it really tough.
Everyone else is doing it tough. And, I look at, outside
and
of
their workers especially.
And
they're all laid off.
Yeah, and they work hard. These guys are killing themselves. So I look at Fitzroy Street and Bridge Road in particular. Like Fitzroy Street could be and should be one of our best streets in Melbourne. There isn't a retailer down there that's making money. Not
in St
one.
Kilda?
Not one.
Yeah.
It is an absolute devastation. It's every second shop, or almost every shop, is for lease or for sale, and nothing can happen there. The only way that changes is more people, more density. There needs to be change, and it's a balance between protecting heritage and making sure the city continues to work. And I think like I love heritage. Most of our buildings around here have a heritage element, but heritage doesn't mean it never changes. It can be embraced and actually supported and pushed forward, like the Spanish Club. Spanish Club's a prime example. I mean, they would have had to move 20 kilometres out of town. Thanks to you and the planning process, we were able to come up with something that worked for them. We now paid out their debt. They can operate there for the next 100 years. And that's a great thing for the community. If we weren't able to do that, they'd be out. They'd be 30k out of the city, and the club wouldn't be there anymore.
Just one last question, Tim. A mate of mine who thinks very highly of you, he said he's like the Ali G, Tim, talking about you, he said he's like the Ali G of capitalism. I said, what do you mean? He said, if I got $1 billion tomorrow, I would trademark my name and I would put it on every crane that I had on every building site. So what was that about? I mean, you've got, your brand is very big. I mean, to you and to your company, that's like all your cranes have your name on it. Explain to me a little bit about the thinking behind that.
It's a funny one. When I had 14 years ago, in 2014, when we started this business, we went to the creative business and said, look, I want to start something that's really genuine and it's real. We want to deliver a real product that people love. And they put 4 options out on the table. One was Gurner. I'm like, I'm absolutely not doing Gurner. No chance. It's ridiculous and just looked completely stupid. And we started talking about whatever it was, Project, whatever it was called, or something else. And they came back the next session, had Gurner with the TM on it. I looked and I thought, it actually looks like a brand. Actually looks like something rather than my name. And the lady at the time, Sally, who owns Playground Creative, who's by far the best branding and creative in Melbourne, said to me, this is, if you're serious about this and you're serious about doing a real product, you need to put your name to it, you need to stand behind it and deliver what you promise. And it really stuck with me, and I thought, you know what, you're right, we do need to stand behind it. And anyone who knows me well is the brand and how we position ourselves is the most important thing to me by a mile. Money definitely comes second to how we deliver for our purchases. So we promise a big game, we have to over deliver. And that's why the brand has slowly got momentum and got strength, but it's continuing to over deliver on what we promise.
Where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
Probably pretty similar, doing what we're doing. I love what we do. I'm very fortunate. We're dealing with at the moment a big growing business, which has got a lot of challenges with more resources, more team. I'm not a great manager of team. I'm very good with a smaller bunch. So that's a challenge for the business at the moment we're going through. But from a business brand perspective, it's doing more of what we're doing and better. So it's always trying to challenge, push the norm of what we're doing. And just continue to do what we do. I love what we do. I'm very lucky that I'm extremely passionate about design and creating great things, and that's what we focus on.
Tim, thanks for coming on the show. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, mate. Thanks a lot.
Tim. Cheers.